Well, hey, welcome everyone to the Question Everything Except This podcast, uh, episode one. Yeah, why don't we jump into just a little bit of how we met, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah, Chirag and I actually went to the same undergrad together, and our first experience was in being partnered up in chemistry lab. And we have the same last name, so it went alphabetical order, and so we ended up being paired up together. And I don't know, it was kind of crazy. Like, we just really hit it off the right off the bat, just connected on so many different levels. Just similar backgrounds, and that translated into being just awesome lab partners. I mean, we had another group of friends that, like Chirag, I think a lot of them were your roommates, and some of
Yep,
them
that's
we
right.
just kind of met throughout, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know, we'd like be done, and like our experiment would all be perfect, and they'd
We
still be like
would take
figuring
all the
stuff out, right?
shortcuts and be done first every single time. Yeah, that's right. I think we we were so good. I mean, or we thought we were so good that we were always finishing first, and we would just kind of go hang out with our other friends in the lab once we were done. But yeah, that was our first experience, just gelling together right away. And it's funny. I still have a very like visceral memory of that place, like that lab and the
Yeah.
smells and the sounds and everything. So that was, yeah, it was an amazing experience.
I still remember, like, Vib or like some of our other friends just being like pissed off. They're like, "How the hell did you guys get this stuff?" But yeah, no doubt. And then from there, I remember, I mean, almost as vividly as Chem Lab, just going out to parties and all that. But the other, lasting memory was for sure working at Webster Hall together, and it's still one of the, I guess, most interesting college jobs, or maybe interesting jobs I've ever had in
Yeah,
my life. So,
that is.
working the reverse 9 to 5, and that was we had a lot of fun doing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night for a while there, I think a year or two. I think a little bit longer for me, but we were there at Webster Hall on East 11th Street
Yeah,
every week, and yeah, we would report to work at, what was it, 9 p.m.
yeah,
or yeah, 9 p.m. The club would open at 10, and then we would be there until 5 a.m. And then often with some of our colleagues at Webster Hall, we'd go out for breakfast right after work, and it was a great time. It was an incredible time to be in New York, and it's lasting memories that you make there. Especially during that time in your life where you don't really have any other obligations except school, and it's just a really fun time to be, especially in a place like New York City.
yeah. No question, man. No question. And we got to kind of see it, live it, breathe it, and we got the pride of working, but also the experience of working at a nightclubs, and going from 9 to 5. But I'll tell you, man, like, we've definitely done a lot, and I'm sure we'll get into more and more as we continue in the podcast. But I certainly say, it's been an awesome journey, and we've been friends ever since. Really, those early days at NYU, and we've been fortunate enough to continue to stay in touch, and raise families together and all that good stuff. So it's been an awesome ride so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going on, what, nearly 30 years now, and it'll be 30 years next year.
Good God, hard to believe.
It's
Wow.
insane.
Really insane. Oh, that's really hard to believe, but you're right. It's mind-boggling. All right, cool, man. You wanna jump into some, like, deeper intros about ourselves?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I'll start. For everyone who doesn't know, my name is Chirag Shah. I was born in India in Ahmedabad, in the state of Gujarat. I lived there and in Mumbai for the first 3 years of my life. Don't have too many memories. I have some, actually, surprisingly, but not too many. And then when I was three, my mom and I moved to the U.S. My father was already here. Um, and he had come back to India to marry my mom, and I was born there. And then due to immigration issues, we were kind of stuck there for a few years. My mom for 2 years before I was born, and then so a total of 5 years, and then me until I was three. So in 1980, my mom and I packed up. We moved to Queens. It was, I'm sure for my mom, it was kind of a culture shock, but, some of my earliest memories in Queens. And I even remember actually seeing my dad at the airport. They say your earliest memories form around 3 or 4, something like that. So I definitely have that memory very vivid in my mind. So yeah, that I grew up in first in Flushing for the first, I'd say, 8 years of my life, or 8 years in the U.S. And then we moved to Jamaica, Queens, for the next 3 years. So really, elementary school and middle school was all in Queens. And we're talking, Flushing and Jamaica are two extremely diverse areas. Not only a lot of Indians, but a lot of Asians. Every minority you can think of. I mean, I think Queens is probably the melting pot of New York City, and you come across every single culture you can imagine there. So, at the end of my middle school, high school is a strange thing in New York because you can obviously go to the local high school where you live, and that in my case was either the high school in Jamaica or the high school in Richmond Hill. But those were extremely rough areas, especially back then in the late 80s, early 90s. So my parents didn't want me going there. And the other alternative was I actually took the entrance exam for the specialized high schools in New York, which, if you don't know, consist of, Stuyvesant High School, the Bronx Science, which is very famous, and then Brooklyn Tech. And I think there might be one or two other ones now. But so I did get into Stuyvesant High School, but that would have entailed me taking the J train, which went through the absolute worst area of New York City, or one of the worst, in East New York, from Queens into Manhattan. So my parents said absolutely not, and then they, subsequently packed us up and moved us up into the absolute opposite environment you could think of Queens, which was upstate New York, in the extremely suburban area of upstate New York, which was decidedly not diverse at all. So, a handful of Indian kids, some Asians, but I'd say 95% white. So that was quite the shock for me. And moving around a lot when I was younger, did impact my kind of personality. I'm told, very outgoing when I was younger. So up until fifth grade, I had a very stable childhood up until, I'd say, fifth grade, which is when we first moved from Flushing to Jamaica. And even in Jamaica, I was okay. But I think that move from Queens to upstate New York really shocked my system, and it kind of caused me to go into my shell. So, that I retreated a lot into books and music and sports. Being really guarded with myself. I became a lot more of a private person. And that kind of took me through high school. So I went, my entire high school education was in upstate New York, and I'm actually kind of thankful. While it was a shock. The high school I went to in upstate was one of the best in New York State. So I got a really great education, and as a result, I was able to get into NYU, which now it's considered one of the best schools in the country, but even then, I mean, it was up and coming, and it was still considered one of the best, right? So that experience going to NYU really opened me up, and really, in my mind, New York was the only place for me. As I kind of lived in the suburbs, I really didn't like that experience. I grown up in Queens, and those 4 years in the suburbs were not, I would say, the most enjoyable years for me. So I was dying to get back into New York. So, if I didn't get into NYU, I had some other options lined up, but really that was the only option for me. So I even applied early decision, which I don't know. I think it was early decision. That's the one where you're bound to go to the school if you get in. Yeah. So it was early decision. So I got in, and I, was dying to go. So, that first year at NYU really opened me up. Those experiences I had, the friends I made. I met my future wife there, my sophomore year, but yeah, that really opened me up and really changed my life in terms of, what I thought was possible for me. Um, so that kind of, led me on my path to be, I was really interested in technology. I was a programmer from early on. I started my career as a developer, and then eventually moved on to be a project manager and now a program manager in IT and the digital space. Um, and then that's kind of my career. And obviously I started a family. I married my wife. I have 3 kids now, but I'd say more recently, what kind of led us to this podcast is I went through kind of a personal rut that started, and I'm sure this story is you know familiar to a lot of you out there, that started during the pandemic and lasted kind of through the pandemic and even a little bit after that, right? So um, last year, something happened that really kind of led me in a new path, which is a few events that happened in rapid succession. So I read a book called Stolen Focus, which is a book by a man named Johan Hari. And it's a book about how our modern world is, all the digital distractions that we have with our phones and social media, and the constant barrage of information that's thrown at us, has just fractured our attention and just made us into kind of like these, um, you know, these humans that can't really focus on anything, right? So, all these social media companies and all these tech companies are really stealing our focus. So, that book really taught me to try to focus better offline. So, I cut out a lot of social media. I cut out a lot of like kind of screen time, started reading a lot more. And it's ironic because it's a book that, you know, somehow I was kind of inclined to read. That led me down that path, which is great. And then around the same time, I rediscovered, something called Stoic philosophy, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, even though I think sometimes it's misunderstood. And I'd read about it before, but I think something about that time last year in my life where I'd read this other book and I rediscovered the Stoic philosophy, and specifically Ryan Holiday and his Daily Stoic website and videos. It's something about it just really hit me hard. Um, you know, Something about the Stoic philosophy. One thing about Stoic philosophy is, something called memento mori, which is remember death, really. And it's just a constant reminder that our time on this earth is really, really short, and we hit a cosmic jackpot just by being here. So, it's something that I kind of take with me now, and really try to use to make the best out of my life, and try to really think deeply and not be distracted so much, and do deep work, and have meaningful relationships. So that's the second thing. So just rediscovering Stoic philosophy, and then the third thing that happened was I read a book called Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, and some of you might be familiar with him, but it's a book about not only improving our or increasing our lifespan, but increasing our health span. And I won't get into the details of it now. I think that could be a whole episode on its own, but it really caused me to take a look at how I live my life, and get into better shape. I've been spending a lot of time, with all the time that I saved from not being distracted by all these digital distractions. I've been putting a lot more time into getting my mind and body into better shape. So yeah, those three things last year really helped me. And just as an example of how it helped me by cutting out all these digital distractions, I'd say from like 2019 to 2022, I was looking back on my Goodreads history, and I probably read a total of 5 books in that time. And then just in 2023, in the second half of 2023 alone, and that's I read Stolen Focus sometime in the middle of the year. So the second half of the year, I read 12 books. So, I basically tripled my output in a little under half a year from the previous 3 years. So, and that's not to boast. I mean, everyone reads at different speeds, and it's that by cutting out all the digital distractions, it really allowed me a lot more time to focus on myself, to really try to improve myself, right? So so yeah. Um, so everything since then has kind of flowed from those three events in my life in the past year. Um, and I recently been thinking a lot more about philosophy, trying to read a lot more, not only the Stoics, but other philosophers. I recently read a book by Alan Watts who kind of demystifies Hindu philosophy and kind of strips away the mysticism and the superstition out of the religion, and really just looks at the philosophy from the original scriptures. So I find that really interesting. Um, so yeah, I was just exploring different aspects of philosophy um, and yeah, and then we'll kind of get into how we came to this podcast. But I want to throw it over to Sinead to talk about his journey.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's so interesting. I know you and I talked a little bit about Stolen Focus and Johann Hari, and I don't think I told you this like real quick story. Like I had a similar kind of excitement when I first read Stolen Focus and was introduced to Johann Hari as an author, and I think the timing of when that book was published was couldn't have been, more appropriate. And we were looking at, our kids were in very formative ages. Like I had, kids in middle school when I first, two boys in middle school when I first came upon that book, and we're like, oh my gosh, we got to get, like, my wife and I were like, we got to get everybody like aware of this. Like, we can't raise kids that are like, because a lot of kids, they start getting cell phones in middle school. That was our timeline, and
Yeah.
like we basically went on this whole, like, my wife joined the like PTO, and she's like, I'm going to join the events committee, and we're going to have to get Johan Hari to become like a presenter at the school and like bring him in and speak to the children. Like, we
Oh, I
got
didn't know
really
that.
excited
Yeah.
about it, and then we run into like school board PTO politics. I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, just get the fucking guy in. Like, why is this so difficult? And then, unfortunately, man, I tell you, we couldn't quite, get the we couldn't cut through the bureaucracy to get him in. And it was interesting because it was literally a coalition of, like, my wife had like three or four other friends that wanted to bring him in to speak, and then there was just another group that was kind of, I guess, the, let's call it, the establishment, and they had no interest in this. They wanted to kind of go with what they've done in the past. So
Right.
we lost the battle. But anyway, just another connection point for you and I of how, this book is just like, yeah, had such a big impact on our life,
Yeah.
and it did for me as well. Definitely, help me to put how I spend my time into more perspective and be more expensive with my time, meaning, like, don't just give it away for free, right? Like, make sure
Yeah.
I'm doing things that are
Absolutely. It's our
productive. And
most precious resource. Absolutely.
yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, it tells you, it's just like anything that it's like kind of watching the clock, right? Like, if you're not careful, someone else, and or intent, or like intentful with what we do, right? Like, someone else will come and take our time away. And I think we as a society feel guilty to that for sure. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the pod goes on. But
Yeah.
let me go a little bit further back, because I know, you guys got a good feel for Chirag's background. I'll go back to the early days for me, and again, like we talked about it in the intro, like, this is, I think, part of why Chirag and I just kind of hit it off was, I was actually came to America, like, I was born here, right? I know, Chirag, you came, at 3 years old, but I was born here, same area, Flushing, Jackson Heights, like, born in Queens. And I do have a few memories from my childhood, living in New York. When I was about four, we moved to suburban New Jersey. But the one thing that I do recall, and in my time at, being a kid there, was, I don't know how I remember this. Maybe it was from the stories, but I just remember having to walk up all those steps to our apartment. And I don't know how as a kid it bothered me, but, like, that's what I remember about, growing up in there in Jackson Heights. But anyhow, so yeah, then we moved out to suburban New Jersey, and same kind of, like, when I first moved to Jersey, we were like in, like in a slightly more urban area, like just outside of Trenton, So it was still pretty, like not a great area. We're in an apartment, and still a very diverse neighborhood. Like I didn't feel that out of place. There was all kinds of ethnicities, lots of minorities, and was in good shape. And then in third grade, we moved to like real suburbia, and yeah, there was like maybe like 5% of the kids were a minority. Otherwise, it was 95% white,
Yeah.
and definitely culture shock. Same thing, introverted, nerdy, wouldn't tell my parents anything, just kind of went into my own shell, did my own thing. And wasn't really until high school that I met other Indian kids, and I was like, oh, this is cool. There's others like me, and so then I ended up forming with a group of them, and that kind of helped me through high school. But yeah, all throughout that, very very kind of into my schoolwork and focused on my grades, and wanting to really get to college. I mean, I just remember this sense of like being so sick of living at home and like the boredom of suburbia, and it being so kind of um uninspiring, and just
Yeah.
like feeling like I was like wasting away. And then yeah, when I finally I did the same thing like you. I did early decision to NYU. I knew I wanted to go back to the city, and like my dad went to NYU too, so there was a little bit of like continuity there. And yeah, I majored in chemical engineering, which was like a weird thing, but my dad was a chemie too, so I was like, yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm like, yeah, easy enough, like just do what your dad did. So that's essentially what I did. That was my motivation for my major. But I'll tell you, when it comes to thinking about life and philosophy. I mean, I feel like I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. And I remember like thinking that there was something wrong with me because I was having all these like weird thoughts about, the purpose of life as like a 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old. And I'll never forget, like, as I was learning about the planets and like thinking about how planets work and how they spin and they're circular. And I don't know, I feel like something about like learning about biology at the same time was like, but we have like cells and things in our body. And I just made this like weird connection of like, well, what if the planets are like cells in another gigantic being's body? And, we're just kind of this insignificant, being on this cell that's like, part of another large, gigantic, being. And I was like, that's a really weird thought. Like, I don't know if anybody else has thoughts like that. And I later learned like it was very similar to, right, like the whole concept of fractals. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I thought, we were. And I'm like, well, yeah, like there's no way we'll ever prove it or disprove it. But I mean, I guess that's what philosophies are. I mean, you just kind of, look for, certain, factors or certain concepts or thoughts that make sense, and you try to string them together and try to build purpose around that. And I mean, I feel like that's what we're going to be doing in this podcast, and I love doing it. I enjoy doing it, and yeah, looking forward to doing more and more of that as we kick off and dig deeper into this. And I know we talked in the beginning about books that we've read, and those definitely inspire us. And I'm very similar to you in that I didn't study philosophy in school. Like I was an engineer and all that. So philosophy was just something that I just kind of talked about it. And I feel like just like you kind of mentioned in the train ride, like it was just such a great vibe and a great connection to just talk about philosophy. And I'm like, well, this is like, how great would it be to just dedicate time every week or every couple weeks to just talk about this stuff. Like that would be so much
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. And actually, I don't think we talked
Right?
about that yet. So why don't we talk about a little bit about how we came to this podcast? So,
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah, I think let's see, in January, I believe it was of this year, 2024. Sorry, we were meeting up with some friends for a Knicks game in the city, and Sunay and I happened to, meet up. We were taking the train in from Secaucus into New York, into Penn Station, and we happened to be on the same train, just coincidentally. So we sat together, short train ride, but we kind of started talking about some of these things that we'd been thinking about recently. It just kind of came up, and yeah, we kind of talked, had similar. And I feel like this is our whole history. Is like we kind of come to things around the same time. We kind of have a similar history, and yeah, we kind of came to this around the same time, and we've both been thinking about this a lot. And so we got to talking on the train ride in, also on the train ride back, about philosophy and all these things we've been thinking about. And that once that was done, we I don't think we talked for a little while, but I think we did start sending some articles and some links back and forth over text and email, and that sparked some discussion back and forth, just over email and text. And I think Sunay, it was you that said we should just set aside some time to talk about this every week. And then I had the bright idea of, hey, why don't we just start a podcast? We're going to talk about it anyway. Everyone else has a podcast, so why not us?
Right. Yeah, no, that's it, man. That's it. That's great. Yeah, no, well said, man. And I think there's also some accountability to continue to, dig and ask good questions and help us to figure out what and why and all that good stuff of and the meaning of life here. So, like having the audience hold us accountable to making this happen, especially like given where we are in like midlife with family, kids, career, all that stuff. It's definitely, important for us to get into a routine to spend time talking about this because I mean, what in some ways like what is more important than this and understanding our why of why we do what we do. And I think it's so important for us to spend that time, at least given our disposition, because I think it impacts every other part of our life. So yeah, can't wait, man. Can't wait. I'm fired up. I'm
Yeah, sounds
excited,
great.
and yeah, looking forward to digging in.
Definitely, man. All right, yeah. So, maybe we can talk a little bit about what we envision this podcast to be, right? So, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but I think we've talked about I think it's partially philosophy, right? I mean, and we can kind of talk about a little bit about what philosophy even is, right? So, um, it's for me when as I've been thinking about it recently, as we started this discussion about the podcast, it's really about living life, right? Like I think it's applicable to everyone. Like you said, it's how do we live our life? We it's a short time that we're on this world in this life, right? I think Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it well, where he says that we hit the cosmic lottery, right? Like the jackpot, like of all the various combinations of DNA, we somehow formed consciousness, like our singular consciousness is here, and that is a complete fluke, and we are lucky to be here, right? So, and then our time frame, this 60, 70, 80, 90, even 100 years that we're going to be on this earth is just a drop in the bucket of cosmic time. So I think philosophy is, how do we use this time, and how do we improve ourselves? How do we improve the world around us? How do we instill this in our kids? How do we, keep pushing our, humanity forward? How do we keep pushing our civilization forward? And those are big, big questions. And, you know, nothing I don't think we're going to answer on this podcast, but yeah, I think, it's really for everyone. I mean, if you don't think that philosophy is for you, I think you're wrong. I think it is for everyone. And, as far as what we want this to be, we're obviously not scholars, right? We're not, philosophy scholars. We're just two guys, but, I think that that's good. I think, we can talk about some scholarly topics, but it'll be more on the level of, regular people, right? So I hope that it'll be useful to the audience. And yes, Sunay, I don't know if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, bud. From my perspective, like philosophy is the journey to figure out your why. Like for me, it's trying to figure out like why do I do what I do and behave the way that I behave, and is it the right way? Is it the wrong way? Who's to say it's the right way or the wrong way? And you can easily get into these spirals. And I think when I look at at least the different phases of life that we've gone through, from being just our own individual, like we talked about, going through college, and then being a husband, and then being a parent, I feel like each of those layers adds another, layer of complexity and even another perspective on what my why is of living, existing, and doing the things that I do. And I think in order for me to feel happy and to feel like I'm a productive member of society, I feel like I need to talk about this and I need to understand this better. And and like aware enough, intelligent enough that I know I'll never find answers, but I feel like the pursuit of answers is where brings me joy. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this podcast as well, is to like talk to you and then talk to others that are like-minded like us, who aren't like PhD philosophy majors in college and academics, but rather like folks that are, doing their 9 to 5 job or whatever we do these days, working from home in our remote office, working in corporate, trying to start their own business, whatever you're doing to make a living for yourself and your family. Um, at times and ultimately we're all going to be faced with our why. Like why are we doing this? Why are we chasing money? Why are we, chasing a new car or whatever materialistic, item that, that might attract our attention or give us motivation? And like just can't wait to talk and talk more about it. And I think we're definitely going to try to steer away from things like politics and like election drama and like any of that stuff. I think we're going to really be focused much more on you know you know things like consciousness, like truth, like meaning, determinism, right? Like I think it's good, stoicism, and all the other different sort of, you know, people that have come before us that have tried to figure this out, build upon it, and see how we can bring that narrative, and use what we can from history to bring that narrative forward into our modern era, because there's really nothing that I think has prepared us for what we're facing in our lifetime right now. And I mean, at least from our lifetime, Bud, like I don't think it's ever been more important or relevant to talk about philosophy and truth and humanity and empathy and, what like is the best way to live a life where we can live in harmony with our fellow human beings and, provide the best for each other and reach fulfillment and happiness. So, yeah, I think it's super timely, and yeah, like I said, I can't wait to dig in.
And not to mention our future AI overlords. But
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
but yeah, no, I'm with you, man. That sounds great. All right, that's the pod. Great discussion as always. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to join the conversation, email us at questioneverythingexcept@gmail.com. See you next time.